Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about what is autism, a part of my senior thesis. What is autism? Is it a disease or a personal characteristic? Many people have asked this very question, but what is interesting is that the definition of autism, quote, it is a comprehensive growth of normality in which social skills, language, communication, and behavioral skills are developed with delay and as diversionary. There is about 1 in 54 children has been identified with autism spectrum disorder according to the CDC. People have commonly known that autism includes people who have mental issues, but there is much more than meets the eye. According to NATTAP partners, 63% of students who are bullied are on the spectrum, and according to the CDC, 1 in 59 children, 1 in 37 boys, 1 in 51 girls have autism in America. This fact not only alarmed me, but gave me a signal that something must be done about this because those people deserve to be treated with more love and understanding from others since they are not only misunderstood but also unfairly stereotyped. There are many positive effects of inclusion where both students with special needs along with the other students in the classroom both benefit. Research has shown positive effects for children with disabilities in areas such as reading, individualized education program (IEP goal), improving communication and social skills, increasing positive peer interactions, and many educational outcomes, and post-school adjustments. Positive effects on children without disabilities include the development of positive attitudes, perceptions of persons with disabilities, and the enhancement of social status with non-disabled peers. Autism is 4 times more common in boys than in girls. It knows no racial, ethnic, or social boundaries. Family, income, lifestyle, or educational level do not affect a child's chance of having autism. In 1908, the word autism first came up when it described patients who were especially withdrawn or self-absorbed. In the present, others might call this very offensive, but in that time people considered autism as something that was negative, not positive. In 1912, the Swiss psychiatrist Egon Buehler published one of the most complete descriptions of schizophrenia and schizophrenic thought processes in German. The term autistic thinking is defined by Buehler as an aspect of healthy functioning, one for that are loosened or disturbed in schizophrenia. Buehler's autistic thinking is detaching oneself from outer reality along with a relative or absolute predominance of inner life. In 1943, an American child psychologist, Leo Kanner, published a paper on 11 children who were highly intelligent but displayed a powerful desire for aloneness and an obsessive insistence on persistent sameness. He later named the condition as early infantile autism. Later, in 1944, a German scientist called Hans Asperger's described a milder form of autism which is known as Asperger's syndrome. He stated that they were highly intelligent but had trouble with social interaction and specific obsessive interests. Next, in the late 1960s, a psychologist named Bruno Bethlehem created a theory that autism was caused by so-called refrigerator mothers because they didn't love their kids enough. When I saw this, I was not surprised but angry at the same time because a psychologist created a false theory that autism was caused by mothers not loving their kids enough. During the post-World War II era, Parents advisor Fred Volcker, the director of the Child Study Center at Yale University School of Medicine, and editor-in-chief of the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, stated that researchers solely looked at the impact of life experiences, and they didn't consider the role of biology or genetics, which we now understand to be the main cause. Autism was also classified under schizophrenia in the International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, although scientists now know there is no link between those conditions. A few years later, in 1977, a research on twins found that autism was largely caused by genetics and biological brain differences. 3 years later, the DSM listed infantile autism for the first time. It was officially separated from childhood schizophrenia. This goes back to corroborate Volcker's point on how scientists now know that there is no link between schizophrenia and autism. Therefore, it was one of the biggest steps forward for the autism community. In 1987, the DSM replaced infantile autism with a more expansive definition of autism disorder, which included a checklist of diagnostic criteria. UCLA psychologist Ivar Lovaas did a study which showed how intensive behavioral therapy can help children with autism, which gave hope to parents. I think the way this article phrased it was a bit incorrect because they should have said that it can also help people with autism who are struggling with everyday problems and not make it seem like people with autism are the ones who cause more problems to their parents. Later, the hit movie Rain Man premiered in 1988, which featured Dustin Hoffman as a character who was a savant and had autism. It displayed Hoffman's character as having a photographic memory and the ability to calculate large numbers in his head. Volcker thinks this was crucial at the time because it raised awareness for autism, but he also kind of implies that this movie was not an accurate portrayal of every person with autism, since they are all different. I agree with Volcker because although this movie was great to raise awareness for autism, but it also brings up a very common stereotype with autism that everyone with autism has savant skills, which is not true. In 1991, the federal government categorized autism under special education, and public schools began identifying and offering special services to many with autism. This was a momentous step in the right direction for the autism community because it not only started the conversation about autism awareness, but it also discussed how schools can help them more. On the other hand, it sets up a future debate on the use of the word special education, which people now find more very offensive since it implies that they were the ones with mental issues and problems, which is not true. In 1994, Asperger syndrome was added to the DSM, which further expanded the autism spectrum to include more milder cases in which individuals tend to be more high functioning. In 1998, a study in The Lancet suggested the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine caused autism, which was later debunked. It was an outrageous notion which provoked those with ASD, because it implies that autism was somehow a disease that was passed through vaccinations. Yet in 2000, vaccine manufacturers removed thimerosal from all given childhood vaccines due to public fears about its role in autism, even though the vaccine autism link was debunked. 9 years later, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimated that 1 in 110 children had autism in America, and in 2007 it was 1 in 150 children. The CDC noted that there was an increase of people with autism because of the improved screening and diagnostic techniques. Later in 2013, the DSM-5 combined all subcategories of the condition into one umbrella diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. Asperger's syndrome was no longer considered a separate condition to ASD. ASD is defined by two categories: impaired social communication and interaction, restricted and or behavioral repetitive behavior. Some see autism with a negative bias, while others see it with a more open mind. In an article, it talked about that for many years the relevance of culture to autism was ignored, and some researchers believed that autism was intrinsically linked to modernity and westernization, and was rare in other cultures. I think my views can be best expressed in this way. While autism itself, the pathology of it, may not be culturally determined, our interpretations of those behavior and our responses to those behavior is. It's not hard to disagree with David Mandel because sometimes it is not only the culture that determines that country's point of view of autism. However, it might also be because of their own interpretation of what autism actually is. For instance, in many Asian cultures, children are expected to be respectful to their elders through their language and behavior, but these aspects of social interaction can be tricky for children with autism to master. Those kind of behaviors will be hardly noticed in the West. In most Western countries like the UK and USA, many experts encourage many to get diagnosed at an early age in order to get early intervention, but many with autism outside the US and Western Europe are somehow not encouraged to do so because of the lack of awareness of both developmental norms and autism. A particular example I can bring up is South Korea. There was a study done of more than 55,000 children which estimated autism prevalence at 2.64%. And the most interesting part is that they have twice the autism prevalence rate of the United States. Researchers think that autism goes underdiagnosed in Korea because there is a strong stigma attached with autism over there. People think that if a child had autism, it may not only affect the marriage prospect of siblings, but also affect his or her parents' careers. Hence, parents often label their child as having reactive attachment disorder or lack of love as is known in Korean. About two-thirds of children who identified as having autism were not receiving any autism-related services. A lot of these kind of children and kids in Korea are mostly called a border child, which is a new term to describe someone who wants to be diagnosed, who will be diagnosed from the West. And somehow parents in that country prefer this label because it implies that the child is only impaired socially, not intellectually, and that the condition is temporary. South Korea should have more awareness of autism because this not only demonstrates that they lack the understanding of autism, but also how they mistreat or misunderstand people like that. It is unfair to say that this is how other countries in Asia treat the autism community, but a lot of places in Asia seem to look down on autism as a taboo. On the other hand, in many Western cultures, like in America or the UK, people want to understand autism, and not only do they get their children diagnosed early, but also try to see what they can do to help them. It is very interesting to see how different cultures treat people on the spectrum. In present day, autism awareness is gaining traction every day, and more people around the world are starting to grasp the importance of understanding this condition. But there are also people who are still indifferent and ignorant. For example, in 2010, Autism Speaks launched a Light It Up Blue initiative on April 2nd, which was anointed as World Autism Awareness Day by the United Nations. This was intended to raise more international awareness for autism. In the next few years, the number of famous buildings where lighting it up blue increased, especially this year. I think this is great for the international understanding of autism because awareness in any way is great. But on the other hand, I don't feel it made any significant difference for the autism community. because I think educating the public on what autism actually is probably one of the most crucial aspects of any awareness campaign. Lighting up buildings blue is great. When it comes to actually helping people with autism, I don't feel like people learn something about autism from that. So because of that feeling, I've created a concert every year since 2016 called Autism Rocks. And this goal is to destigmatize any stereotypes people have on the autism community by giving them a platform to perform on to prove they are as capable as a neurotypical person. I feel like I feel like rather than giving others a lecture about autism, making it entertaining and educational was a more effective way to get through to people because the power of music has always brought people together. If people get a chance to see what people with autism can actually do with music, then it will teach them that others with autism can also contribute a lot to society. On the other hand, there are many instances that disturb people with autism to this day. Recently, I've read an article from the Washington Post talking about how a 14-year-old girl with autism attempted suicide twice after her bully told her to kill herself. I felt absolutely outraged when I read this because bullying under any circumstances is unacceptable, and it's always very upsetting to me to see such a young teenager who was 14 wanting to kill herself. I felt very disappointed when I read the part about how the school not only didn't take any reasonable measures to prevent it or to stop it from happening, but also inadvertently created, fostered, or permitted a hostile environment to exist in RN's school that deprived her of educational opportunities and benefits on the basis of her disability. This really exudes that even with all the awareness and other things that is happening, some people still don't take autism seriously or want to help them even when they are in dire need of support from their school in situations like these. So I think from now on, people should take a look into these matters seriously, but also be more educated on this topic because everyone deserves to be treated with respect and love. Since I was very small, I always knew I was different, but never knew how different I was because my family failed to tell me my diagnosis of autism. I went through a lot of therapy for a long time from speech to physical therapy. I remember I had to balance a beanbag on my hand to test my hand-eye coordination in order to test my motor skills. My parents also were an integral part of me going to kindergarten because they had to keep ties with the schools in order to know how I can better improve and how they can better teach me to fit in with everyone else. I went to America so I could have a better shot at therapy. I went to kindergarten called Tiger Tots and then went to Kangchao International School for 2 years. I remember that I enjoyed it. I made a few friends during my time over there. I have flashes of small things I remember here and there. I remember I always ate dinner Friday and Saturday night with my mom's family. I'm closer to my mom's side of the family because I got to spend more time with them, and I lived in the same apartment building with them. When I was in elementary school, I started off at Kangchao International School. I had Asperger's, which I did not know at that time since my parents never told me. One day after one class at Kangchao, my parents dragged me out of the class to tell me that they found a better school for me, and that is TES. After a conversation with them, I agreed that it would be best for me because I would have teachers from around the world, but I was very shy. I remember the first teacher in 2005 I ever had was Jasmine Soon. I did not have many friends, so I never really got to hang out with other people. Then I went to a school located in Winling Road at the time with more land that used to belong to them. I enjoyed my time at TES and had to go to Yangmingshan where at that time all the elementary, middle school, and high school students were located. The first big thing I did was at a reading recital. I had to speak in front of my whole school while I recited a phrase from the book Blabbermouth because I was chosen by multiple teachers. I remember so clearly that when I needed to speak in front of the whole school, I declined because I was nervous. I was not a confident person when it comes to giving presentation or speeches in front of people because I was afraid I was going to be teased or messed up in front of everybody. My second grade teacher was called Mrs. Morgan. I was always in special education. My parents had convinced me, and I did not know why. Um, so I thought it was not a big deal until a bunch of classmates made fun of me because I took special education and said that it was for stupid people, which was not true at all. I remembered in the second grade that I felt ashamed of myself because I got an award for making an effort to socialize, and I did not realize how embarrassing it was, but it felt like it was. And then, in the third grade, my school moved us down to Willing Road again. Since my school remodeled, my third grade teacher, Mr. Stephen Shan, who was from Canada, was my teacher. I got introduced to something, politics, by looking at CNN and getting starstruck by a candidate called Hillary Clinton. I was enamored by the election process in the United States because it was nothing I'd ever seen. I first looked at the Democratic and Republican primaries and caucuses with amazement because there are so many talented candidates like Biden, Obama, Clinton, Edwards. I followed every Democratic primary. I remembered the night of the Obama's inauguration. I was probably the only third grader to watch it because no one my age would be interested enough to watch it. Every classmate of mine probably did not watch any politics, and probably that's why they made fun of me. Um, I mean, for example, things were not really good because I ran for the student council. I lost. I was not popular enough. I was depressed all the time. I remember that I wasn't happy. I remember during break times I only talked to my special education assistant with me at all times, and I always walked alone in the cafeteria or in the hallways alone with no friends to talk to. And talking to adults was easier for me. There was one time when Mr. Shan threatened me that he would send me back to kindergarten if I don't know how to answer a math question, and I was very startled by him because I am shocked a teacher would ever do such a thing. Another big thing that happened was when we held a talent show. No one wanted to pick me in their groups, and I remember so vividly how angry I was when that happened because no one should ever go through that painful process. In the end, one of my classmates called Anand Sanaforth raised his hand and volunteered to be my partner. That moment was probably one of the brightest parts of my childhood because someone actually wanted to be in the same group as me, someone with autism. The teasing and bullying started around this time when I was in the fifth grade. Kento teased me because I was different. After a semester of the fourth grade, I met a guy called Vincent Chen and introduced me to the sport of baseball and MLB. I knew everything about baseball, the statistics, the players, and everyone. I played with Vincent, Lise, and Eric Dubois. I never felt great joy in my life. I was a Yankee fan, and I loved it, and I was hooked to it. Many people warned me about Vincent about how tricky he was, and I didn't listen to Anand or anyone else. Um, when I became a fifth grader, Vincent came to me with the bad news that his older brother passed away. He told me to keep it a secret, which I did. The next thing I know was a mystery to me. You know why? Because the younger student, Takashi, set me up for some reason and made everyone think that I was the one who told Vincent's secret, which got me into a lot of trouble. I went into school and I saw a lot of people back heckling me, which made me feel absolutely terrible. Being blamed for something I did not do was one of the worst moments of my life. To get back to my point, almost everyone was teasing or bullying me that day, and no one was there to ever support me, and I had the heart to care. Even the very few friends I trusted decided to betray me because they cared more about themselves than being a friend to me. I tried to tell Vincent I wasn't the one who told a secret, but he utterly made everyone vilify me and become a target for me to get bullied. I could not believe a person can be capable of such actions because I told him the truth, and I can't believe he didn't believe his own friend rather than he did not believe me. but he believed a stranger, and I don't get why people do that. And the teachers were always awful to me because it was their duty to help to teach children what the correct thing to do was. But they would rather have absolutely no idea of the kind of damage the bullying was inflicted upon my life. My mom went to the school consistently and wanted the school to do something about it, but they never did. I felt alone and unsupported by everyone, including my own parents, because they would never take my problems seriously. For example, my mom would, for some reason, be mad at me whenever I told her my problems of being bullied, because she did not want my emotions to affect her, which was a very weird way to put it, since I am her son, and it should be her responsibility as a parent to listen to my issues I suffer with every day and try to help me solve this issue together. Instead, she neglected me when I most needed her, and she acted very irrationally whenever I told her because she did not want to deal with my problems. After middle school started, my bully Vincent left TES, and many people still made fun of me, and I still felt alone, and teachers did not help me, and people betrayed me. The feeling was like no other because I felt trapped and isolated. The biggest moment in the sixth grade was probably when I apologized for being annoying in front of my whole English class, which then, when I look back on, as a mistake because I did not think that it was right for me to apologize for being myself, and that was something that I could not change myself. But when I did that, I met an ally called Howard Chu, who was in my class and told me his willingness to help me because he knew I'd been through a lot, and he could not stand by as I got bullied every day. This was the first moment of my life I not only felt also happy because no one ever supported me like that. When seventh grade started, a lot of things happened. Firstly, I met my old friend from kindergarten called Tiger Hong, who was from Kangcha International School. He was the only person that remembered me without asking. He talked for the whole first day and caught up, and I could not even remember any time where someone really recognized me as a great friend. I was happy that someone cared about me so much. Next, I met a guy called Lawrence, who transferred from Canada, half Taiwanese, half Canadian. He was a very homesick person, and I helped him through difficult times, and I loved helping people. I felt connected to him on a personal level since we were so similar personality-wise. When he cried, I was there to help. I gave him support when he needed it the most. One day, he suddenly told me to beat it because he was pissed off and that I was hanging out with him every day. He told me that he wanted me to leave him alone and why I was not hanging out with my other friends. But the answer was because I did not have friends at all. This broke my heart and made me lose trust in everyone in the world because everyone I came in contact with either betrayed me or did not stand by me when I needed them to. After that day, we went to our separate ways because I thought it would be better if I'm not associ- if he's not as- if he's associated with an unpopular fellow like me. After a horrible seventh grade, I decided to leave to a boarding school called Dunning School in Los Olivos, California, because I wanted to run away as far as possible from my mom and my horrible past. I wanted a brand new start, but that definitely does not involve my old school. So in August 2012, I moved to a boarding school and lived with the principal's family, which turned into an absolute nightmare very quickly. The principal's wife, Maura Beck, was an absolute mess of a person, because she was not only racist, disrespectful, demanding, but also very difficult to live with, and made my life a living hell. I felt depressed and lived in a shade of darkness during the time of the school. I felt like I couldn't escape. I wanted so bad to believe that my life can get better, but it did not. I tried to talk to people, make connections, but it did not work. The only thing that made me happy was when I called my grandmother because she was the only one that understood me and gave me advice. Her voice always puts me at ease in the midst of everything that is bad in the world. She always knew how to make me smile and be happy. Whenever I talked to her, I had forgotten how I actually felt like to be happy, but she always reminded me of it. She was she had a serious cancer operation 2 years before I went to done. So I was very concerned at the same time for her health. The abuse from the principal's wife continued, and the unspeakable happened. Every night I would create on my type of European school uniform signed by a bunch of my classmates from that school. I regretted the decision to go to that place that would discriminate me and treat me like a piece of garbage. I did the unspeakable because I considered committing suicide multiple times with a letter cutter that I had on my desk, and I came close to stabbing myself in the heart. The only person I disclosed my darkest feelings to was my mother, and had no one else. But as you would learn later, the principal confronted me a few days later in February 2012 and told me to take a break from the school since I said that I wanted to kill myself. But somehow they found out I was put on 24-hour suicide watch, and after a few hours, I was somehow asked to leave the campus immediately for some reason. The driver immediately took me to the great aunt's house until my mom arrived the next day. She was very angry at me because I got in trouble with the principal. Guess what happened next? The next day was a total disaster because I not only found that I was expelled, but expelled because I was a liability to the school. A liability? Are you kidding me? That word made me feel insulted and offended because I was a human being with actual feelings that needed to be respected, and the kind of disrespect they gave me was total BS. The school should care more about their students than their own reputation, because it should be the job of all teachers to make sure it is a safe and secure environment to go in. I was heartbroken, upset, and sad about this. A week later, my father went back to my old school, the type of European school, to talk to the assistant headmaster, James Woodle, in order to let me come back to the school I desperately wanted to go back to. In the end, they allowed me to come back, which was great news to me because I so badly wanted to accomplish my wish. My wish was that I wanted to become popular, be respected, liked by my peers at my school I grew up at, and be friends who once did me wrong because I liked a challenge and wanted a brand new start. On March 6, 2013, on a normal day, I went swimming for my PE class just like any other time. When we returned to school, I immediately saw my driver Hiroshi with a worried look on his face, and he walked straight toward me and told me that I needed to go back to my family house in the city right away because my grandma is very close to death. It did not hit me until the moment he told me, even as my mom told me the day before that she was going to leave us. I still went on with my life seemingly okay with it. But actually, I was in denial because I lost so much. I did not want to focus on the future, but the present. The moment arrived when I entered the door of my house, rushing towards my grandma's bedside. Everyone was there, my aunts, cousins, uncles, and my grandfather, not to mention my parents too, with a pastor, as they all sung hymns to say goodbye to her. I remember her laying on the bed. She was very pale, breathing heavily, and seemed very uncomfortable. I teared up immediately during the process of watching her die in front of my eyes. When she died, I immediately broke down in tears, and a piece of me that I could never get back was totally obliterated because that was how important she was to me. No one would ever know what it feels like to lose someone like my grandmother. I kept staying with her body for hours to come until my mom told me to leave. I was in so much shock that my mom had to drag me out of there. My life was like a black hole sucking the love out of my life. My life had gotten even worse than I can possibly imagine because I have no friends, support, understanding. It was not only depressing but also disaster for me. For months, I would mourn the death of my grandmother. I would go on a personal journey to find myself, to try to make myself better. I find therapists and fired many because they kept telling me that I should change the way I am, even though I could not. I hated having therapists who told me that what to do and blamed me for things I did not cause because I already had enough of that crap in my life. I found Dr. Zhao, who later became my therapist for years to come, and she was not only a good listener, but she gave me good advice. She was the first person to make me smile for a long time because I had PTSD, so I was depressed. In months to come, I was thinking about how to better fit in, and I went to America. And the moment my mom gave me the autism book, I started to see many similarities with my personality traits to the common symptoms of autism. I kept digging and digging for more information of autism so I can know who I am and what I can do. I knew I was different, but did not know what for sure. When I entered high school, I remember so vividly that I wanted the new start because high school is supposed to be the best 4 years of your life, and I really wanted things to get better for me. During the first week of school, I went to Dr. Matthew's English class, and he told us to write one thing no one knew about us. I wrote down that I had Asperger's and gave him the photo of paper afterward. And then, when I gave it to Dr. Matthews, revealing the secrets, he almost read it out loud, but he knows that that was my paper and respected my privacy and did not reveal it. Instead, after I had one class, he told me to stay behind and talk to me about what I wrote. He revealed that his son also had autism, and since then we established a very good relationship between us. I finally felt a teacher who did not neglect me for once. After a few days, Dr. Matthews approached me with a once in a lifetime opportunity to plan a school event to raise awareness for autism. He told me to think about it, so I consulted with my therapist and my family if I should accept this offer because planning and organizing events was not my thing. I later decided to work with the head of the Aspire department, Grace Kennedy, to plan for the event coming in April 2014. Mrs. Kennedy later inspired me to get my actual diagnosis in the months ahead, because she made me realize that in order for me to be at ease, I must find out who I am. On October 2013, I got officially diagnosed with having Asperger's syndrome, and it was a big relief because it helped open many doors for me and helped me understand why I was a certain way for my whole life. When I was planning my very first event, I had a lot of pressure to succeed because I really wanted to make sure this event would change everything at the school for the better and make sure nothing like what I went through would happen to anyone else. I wrote so many ideas for the event I wanted. I wanted to bring in a speaker who was an expert on the subject of autism, do assembly for the whole school so they could be better educated and integrated into this event, and made it a student-led event. I kept my involvement in the event a secret to all. I told the teachers working on it a secret, and and not give my name to the student council when we are communicating with them, when we work with them. I made sure I did not tell any of my close friends or classmates. The reason I wanted to keep it a secret was that I wanted to have my moment when I gave my speech and blow everyone away with it and inspire them to become more accepting and loving towards everyone. During the many months of planning, I asked many students one by one if they would include someone who would be considered different. Can gather info if my event can actually work. As it turned out, a lot of people said yes. I had so what happened is fast forward to a few months in 2014 of April, we did a fundraiser tin shake in front of Mingyao Shopping Mall in Taipei City. We raised up to 87,000 Taiwanese dollars on the day, and a few days later, we went to the Taipei 101 to help the FACT Foundation set up for their Light Up Blue lighting ceremony, which was very nice. April 2nd, 2014 was a big day. It was this day I planned very hard for months. I put my heart and soul into this event. When the time struck 12:40, our Light Up Blue day started. We had Dr. Matthews speak at the assembly about his experiences with his son, who does have autism. The student council introduced everyone to autism, and next up, I gave a big speech I prepared for 6 months. I felt like I wanted to throw up. I was scared. My hands was shaking. This was a big moment for me. I remembered vividly having my favorite teacher, Miss Rana, telling me that I was going to be okay and everyone was great. The moment I went in to give my speech, I remembered how surprised people were. And I was also surprised how I handled everything because I remembered I was confident. When I went out there to give my speech, and I felt absolutely empowered the moment I opened my mouth. I never felt so happy in my life because I finally spoke up after years of abuse for people I finally spoke up about years of abuse for people with autism, but I did not mention my own diagnosis. It felt like I had a bunch of important people and teachers standing next to me. I felt like a star of a TV show, having this big moment where all the spotlight was on them. Specifically, I felt like Emma Stone from La La Land, where her character auditions for a big part of the movie after failure and failure. After I finished the speech, I bowed to the crowd and everyone stood up for me to give me a huge round of applause. I had the biggest smile ever because I never felt so loved, recognized, and seen by everyone in my whole entire life. I was almost going to cry that moment but held it in. I even caught the whole moment on video in order to remind me that no matter what, there is always hope even in the darkest of times. I remember right after my speech, I got a huge round of applause. This moment changed my life and destroyed any kind of unkindness towards me in that school. I made it impossible for anyone to bully me in that school, and it made me happy because that was my goal the entire time. I made so many friends after that, and Tiger and I talked more and more, and everyone included me in their groups. I did. I went on to do a lot of things like model United Nations and visited Botswana, and shared a room with a bunch of guys, and actually had a normal life finally after years of pain. I eventually moved to a school called Oast Christian in Los Angeles, California. Um, I was very popular in that school, and people loved me. And I was very happy, though I did not face any racism in America because it was a very Christian school, so it might have been racist, but they were all nice to me and very welcoming. Um, and I did many things. I met this one guy in a UCLA summer camp in 2016 summer, and a summer camp named Ned Spector, who had prior experience organizing charity concerts. I spoke to him about working on Autism Rocks, a concert that I usually do every year, because I feel like it was my chance to really make a big difference on the spectrum. He told me to consider my offer and get back to me in a few months. Flash forward a few months later, he wrote back to me agreeing to work with me because he not only was touched by my story but felt like it was a good thing to be a part since barely anyone helped people on the spectrum. I worked hard and for many hours and days because I wanted this concert to be perfect. So I wrote the script. I was co-hosting the concert and being a co-organizer too. We wanted to work with an autism charity, so Ned and I worked on that and emailed each other constantly. And I was going to do it at my own school, but they rejected it, so we found somewhere else to do it. And guess what? I did it at Universal Studios the first year of the concert, which was amazing. And from every year since 2016, I had I have hosted 4 concerts and headlined by people on the spectrum and autism allies alike. And I host the concert and talk about the difficulties of living with autism, and I also talked about how people should be more accepting towards them. In conclusion, this paper delves deeper into the conversation and critiqued the history of autism, how different cultures perceive autism, how those with autism are being treated now, my personal journey with autism, and etc. The world is starting to understand autism, but there is still a long way to go for worldwide autism awareness, because there are people who still think it is a disease that is the problem we all need to address. History has shown how much we have come to understand autism and how our collective understanding has improved. But if people look into the cultural aspects of how people with autism are treated, there is still a chasm of misunderstanding in many cultures in Asia and other countries. For my discussion questions, I have 3 questions for you. Number 1, before I talked about autism, what do you think autism was? Number 2, since I talked about the best moment of my life, what is yours? 3, what is the most tragic loss you have ever gone through in your life? These are my references. Thank you for hearing my presentation and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.